Chapter 1625. Wu Qian, whose name was called, didn't have any excitement. He stood up indifferently. As far as he was concerned, whether he joined the cabinet or not, he would still continue to work. It was just that joining the cabinet meant that Yang Chendong trusted him more, which made him a little excited. Just like Yu Qian, the longer he followed Yang Chendong, the more he saw Yang Xie's rapid changes, and the more he was influenced by Yang Chendong's personality. To be recognized by someone he admired was a happy thing no matter how he looked at it. After Wu Qian, Yang Chendong called the fifth name, Long Tainan. This time, the discussion below was even louder, and it couldn't be hidden. Long Tainan was just the chief of public security. To put it bluntly, he was just a person who maintained social security. How could he join the cabinet? In terms of qualifications, he was very shallow. Even when he was qualified to be the chief of public security, many people were skeptical. But now, he actually became the first batch of members to join the cabinet. This greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. But then everyone remembered that Long Tianan's wife was Bugnam of Gojoseon's seventh sister, and he had nepotism. For a time, everyone was relieved. Some people even thought that if Long Tainan could enter the cabinet with his qualifications, did that mean that they also had a chance? For a time, many chiefs of other departments, even the chiefs of important departments, had a look of expectation on their faces. They hoped that the next person to be called would be them. Long Tainan stood up. At this moment, he also had a look of disbelief. It wasn't until he saw Yang Chendong gently nod to him that he knew that everything was true. He immediately took out the style of a soldier and strode straight to the rostrum. In the end, even under the influence of Yang Chendong, Yang Xie had nothing to do with the Great Ming in many aspects. But Yang Xie's development time was still too short, and it was inevitable that he would be influenced by Confucianism. In that era where culture was emphasized, it was really something that many people didn't even dare to imagine that a martial artist like Long Tainan would enter the cabinet. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong's words, even if it was announced by City Lord Yu Qian, his subordinates would have objected loudly. It could be said that it was Yang Chendong who had used his influence to decide this matter. After all, without Yang Chendong, there wouldn't be Yang Xie today. Without the 5-star army, there wouldn't be such a beautiful life. After reading 5 names in a row, Yang Chendong put down the paper in his hand. Then, he glanced at the participants. For a moment, those who were under his gaze couldn't help but straighten their bodies. It was as if they were saying, "Pay attention to me, I'm also very capable." But unfortunately, after looking around, Yang Chendong said, "For the time being, there are only 5 people in the cabinet. As for the other 4, I still need to consider it. But as long as you have the ability, you will have such an opportunity. Not only that, even if the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty are interested, they will also have such an opportunity." What? This sentence was like throwing a large stone into a calm pool, instantly causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. The officials of the Great Ming Dynasty can also enter the cabinet? Doesn't this mean that the competition is too strong? Yang Chendong saw this reaction, and he was happy. This was the result he wanted. He believed that it wouldn't take long for this matter to spread to the imperial court of the Great Ming Dynasty, and it would definitely cause a lot of waves. This was the reason why he built the cabinet at this time. It was to dig a big hole for the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as there were empty seats, he wouldn't have to worry about no one jumping into it. Quiet down. Seeing that everyone was discussing for a while, Yang Chendong reached out and pressed down. Suddenly, there was silence. It's still the same sentence. As long as everyone has the ability, you don't have to worry about not being discovered. Everyone will have a chance to enter the cabinet because the members of the cabinet will change every 3 to 5 years if there are no major accidents. There will be newcomers and there will also be people who leave. 3 to 5 years. This was what Yang Chendong decided after thinking for a long time. If it wasn't fixed, it would only show how terrifying the authority of the king was. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about the people below fighting for power or playing tricks with him. In fact, if one looked carefully at the 5 people who were chosen, there were a lot of things to pay attention to. Needless to say, if Yu Qian didn't enter the cabinet, the others wouldn't have the qualifications to enter the cabinet. Letting him become the head of the cabinet was also a kind of affirmation of his previous work. When he was old, he would naturally retire. At that time, it would be the time for his son to take over the position. The son would inherit the father's business and have 2 cabinet elders. This was enough glory. There were also Shen Yu and Wu Qian. One was the chief of the Ministry of Supervision and the other was the chief of the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. This was enough to show the importance that Yang Chendong attached to the supervision of officials. Presumably, if these 2 people joined the cabinet, who would dare to interfere, they would definitely be severely punished. Moreover, because Yu Qian and Shen Yu were officials from the Great Ming Dynasty, not only were they used for more than 10 years, but they also entered the cabinet. With this, it was equivalent to giving the other officials of the Great Ming Dynasty a lesson. Once the 5-star army arrived at the city gates, they would know what to do. As for the last 2, Wan Shaochen and Long Tainan. One was his uncle, and the other was his brother-in-law. They were equivalent to family. When they were there, when the cabinet made decisions, it would definitely be based on Yang Chendong's will. At least, it would not be out of control. In particular, when Long Tainan entered the cabinet, it also proved that Yang Xie's focus was beginning to lean towards the side of local law and order. With the continuous creation of new areas, how to manage them became the most important thing. The above were Yang Chendong's considerations. All aspects could be considered to have been taken care of. After the meeting, except for the 5 members of the cabinet, everyone else left. After there were no outsiders, Yang Chendong first congratulated the 5 people one by one. Then, he said, 5 cabinet elders, now that Yang Xie is growing stronger, the pressure and responsibility on you is also increasing. Not only do you have to take care of the things in your hands, but you also need to look further. For example, the South Ming Baiming, and the West where the Navy is fighting. Since you are now cabinet elders, the power in your hands is many times greater than before. Every time you make a decision, you have to be very careful. You have to consider all kinds of problems and things. Not to say that you can't make any mistakes, but you have to strive for perfection. Yes. Including Yu Qian, the 5 of them all respectfully replied, yes. Good, since everyone is now cabinet elders, then I still have to give you more responsibilities on top of your original work. For the public, now that the conquest of the Great Ming has begun, it would be best if we can peacefully accept it. For the public, the Great Ming is also a place where people know each other. This matter will require you and Shengong to worry about. If there are old friends who contact you, use them if you can. If you can't, you can also appease them. Not long after, perhaps the South Ming will send a delegation to Qiqian City to study. At that time, I will have to trouble the 2 cabinet elders. Yu Qian and Shen Yu went to receive the officials of the Great Ming. This was the most appropriate thing to do. With them as an example, the officials of the Great Ming would know what to choose in their hearts. Yes, my king. Yu Qian and Shen Yu agreed without hesitation. This was originally something that they should do. Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction. Then, he turned his gaze to Wu Qian and said, Wu Qian, Yang Xie's territory is getting bigger and bigger, and the officials needed are also getting bigger and bigger. When there are more people, it is inevitable that there will be all kinds of people. In terms of personal integrity, I still need Wu Qian to help me check. This king will still say the same thing. If something happens, investigate it. No matter who they are, who their backer is, or how big their background is, as long as they violate the law, just do whatever you want. There is also the issue of the official's property. Whoever doesn't cooperate will no longer be an official. If you want to make a name for yourself, you want to reap benefits, and you want to have power, all the good things in the world can be yours. Good, this official will remember the king's words. Wu Qian revealed a rare smile. He also felt that the pace of Xia's expansion was a bit fast, and there were already signs of problems among the officials. He was thinking about whether he should make a heavy hand to clean up the officials. Now, Yang Chendong gave him an imperial sword. Especially when the property disclosure policy came out, if someone's family had more money than their original income, it would be clear at a glance. If they couldn't clearly state the source of the property, it would be easier to deal with it. So, in addition to his identity as a cabinet elder, there shouldn't be any big problems when it comes to work. Cabinet Elder Long, the problem of public security is the fundamental problem of a country. As long as the country is well governed, the people can put all their energy into building the country. Therefore, the public security headquarters should not only increase the intensity of patrolling, but also send outstanding cadres to some of the new Yangtze's territories to do in-depth ideological work with the people. Let them check each other and expose the people who have problems. They should strive to strangle the crimes in the cradle, so that the losses can be reduced. Also, there are bandits and anti-Yangtze forces in some places. Don't be polite to these people. Contact the local garrison and make a thorough plan to eliminate them in one fell swoop. Don't be soft-hearted. Understood, sixth young master, please rest assured. Long Tainan put down the pen in his hand, stood up, and straightened his body. Finally, it was Luan Xiaochun's turn. Yang Chendong handed over the work of propaganda and education to him. Remember, propaganda is very important, especially in an era where people follow the herd. If this work is done well, it can make the society more stable and the people more motivated. Otherwise, there will be a lot of chaos. There is also the issue of education. You must build more schools, and the Han people must learn to read. Let them know what is loyalty and what is treachery, and better distinguish between right and wrong. Write a report on how much money you need later. Okay, sixth young master, I will go back and have a good talk with the people from the publicity department and the education department. I will definitely do this well. Luan Xiaochun also quickly expressed his attitude. Luan Xiaochun was also very satisfied with managing these two major tasks. This proved that his words still had a lot of weight, and Yang Chendong still thought highly of him. When it came to work, he didn't have any worries. Brothers, Langzi's new book, Duke Ferocious, is already a little fat, you can go and slaughter it. He. New book, Duke Ferocious, please recommend, bookmark, click. During the new book period, please support, Langzi thanks. Chapter 1626. With the establishment of a cabinet and the appointment of 5 elders, the news quickly spread throughout the streets of Qiqian City. After Yang Chendong listened to some work reports in the city lord's mansion, he left and returned to the palace. Because of Yang Chendong's return to the palace, Yang Lu had some free time and returned to his residence in Qiqian City. The moment he entered the residence, the housekeeper, Yang Ying, welcomed him. Master, you've had a hard day. It's all right. Yang Lu forced a smile and said darkly. If there's anything, let's talk in the secret room. Very quickly, Yang Lu sat on a familiar chair in the secret room, drinking tea and listening to Yang Ying's report. Master, old Yuan has sent a message. He said that we are going to check his accounts. He is very nervous and asked when we will take action. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. After Yang Lu sat down, Yang Ying told him the news he had just received. Humph. He has the guts to take the money but doesn't have the guts to face the questioning. He's really a piece of trash. I shouldn't have worked with him. Yang Lu said. Yang Ying also nodded in agreement, but he still continued, it's just that old Yuan knows too much, he can't get off the ship now. He also said. What did he say? Yang Lu asked unhappily. He also said that he has evidence of us. If we don't save him, we'll just die together. Yang Ying thought for a while and gritted his teeth. How dare he? As if someone had stepped on his tail, Yang Lu jumped up all of a sudden. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be threatened. Then send someone to kill him. But if he really has evidence, he must have a backup plan. If he dies, I'm afraid our matter will be exposed. Yang Ying replied worriedly. Yang Lu's originally annoyed expression immediately disappeared. That's right, how could someone like old Yuan not have a backup plan? If he really wanted to have a falling out, the other party would definitely die, and he probably wouldn't be able to escape. After pondering for a moment, Yang Lu sighed and said, then let's keep him alive for now. Send someone to tell White Fox to keep this Yuan guy in check. It won't be too late to deal with him after the dust has settled on our side. The White Fox that Yang Lu was talking about was the CIA's director in charge of the southern Ming area. As mentioned before, the CIA was organized by Yang Chendong's seventh wife, Su Man. At first, he just wanted to give it a try. After all the information came from the Security Bureau. Not only could there be problems, but it was also incomplete. Since ancient times, the way of checks and balances had always been one of the methods that the Wuxia emperors had been most willing to use. As such, the CIA took advantage of the situation to rise. Moreover, because of the creator, Su Maner, the management of the CIA was dominated by women. This was to distinguish them from the Security Bureau and also to fill in the gaps. After all, most of the time, women's hearts were more meticulous, and they would do things more comprehensively. Because of this, Yang Xie's sources of information had always been very accurate. The final judgment would only be made after the final report from the Comprehensive Security Bureau and the CIA. For example, when Yang Lu was sent to Southern Ming to manage the intelligence work of the Security Bureau, he naturally couldn't avoid dealing with White Fox. The ambitious Yang Lu's first thought was to get rid of the White Fox, and it was not difficult to do so. The CIA was only good at gathering information, but in terms of hands-on ability, or in other words, operational strength, they were far from the CIA. But then, Yang Lu considered that even if he killed White Fox, the CIA would send more people. Perhaps Black Fox and Flower Fox would be involved as well. In the end, he gave up on the idea of killing White Fox and changed it to temptation. To be more specific, it was temptation. Yang Lu used himself as bait and put on a posture of pursuing White Fox. It didn't take long for him to successfully turn her into one of his own. Who was Yang Lu? He was one of the 5 servants around Yang Chendong. His hidden power was so great that few people in Yangxia could compare. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as these family retainers didn't commit a crime of rebellion, even if they made a mistake, their lives wouldn't be in danger. This was because the other family retainers wouldn't watch their good brothers get killed. In other words, Yang Lu was a big tree. Once you relied on him, it was equivalent to having no worries for the rest of your life. White Fox was a woman, and she would grow old. Now she was in a high position, but one day, she would retire because of age. There had to be a place for her to go. Yang Lu was undoubtedly the best backer and candidate in her eyes, and the two could be said to hit it off. After sleeping with White Fox, Yang Lu revealed his ambition little by little. At first, it scared White Fox, but she was already on the boat, and now she couldn't get off. Moreover, God knew if Yang Lu would be in trouble if she exposed the matter. But one thing was for sure, and that was that she would definitely be in trouble. She couldn't compare to Yang Lu's brothers who had gone through life and death to plead for him. In the end, White Fox also became one of Yang Lu's subordinates. After the Security Bureau and the CIA were under his control, Yang Lu didn't have any scruples when doing things in southern Ming. Soon, he colluded with the local tycoon Yuan Qian, who was the old Yuan they just mentioned, and started a smuggling business. The goods produced by Xianxia every year were extremely popular. Many merchants hated that they received too little, or else they would have earned more. Yuan Xian was one of them. Among the merchants, Yuan Xian wasn't the most powerful, but he was sufficiently obedient. He became Yang Lu's spokesperson. With Yang Lu's name, it was naturally not a problem for him to obtain more goods from Crimson City. As such, the Yuan clan stood out from the crowd of merchants, and he would only receive 10% of the profits, the remaining 90% would go to Yang Lu. Again, Yang Lu's plan was huge. He needed a lot of money, and he needed to bribe a lot of people to do things for him. Slowly, he took away 5% of Yuan Xian's profits, leaving him with only 5% of the profits. Logically speaking, this wasn't a small amount. However, the problem was that everyone knew that Yuan Xian had connections, and many poor relatives came knocking on his door. In order to not lose face in front of others, Yuan Xian could only puff himself up at his own cost. Slowly, many officials in southern Ming had their eyes on him, and the amount they wanted was not a small amount. Yuan Xian finally couldn't take it anymore. Thinking of the things he had done for Yang Lu, he demanded an exorbitant price. Not only did he want back the 5% that was taken away from him, he also wanted an additional 10%, which was a total of 20% of the profits. How could Yang Lu agree to this? The conflict between the two sides started to appear, and this was what Yang Ying reported. Yang Lu was quite relieved to leave the matter to White Fox. Not only did this woman have good looks, but she was also very capable. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the director of the CIA in southern Ming. He was just a small merchant, and he was confident that he could control him. Yang Lu also knew that there was a problem, and he couldn't avoid it forever, so he had to hurry up. He couldn't help but look at Yang Ying and said, "Go to Fourth Master Yang Yang's place and tell him this." Yang Lu returned to Crimson City and started to get busy. Establishing the cabinet was just one of the countless things he had to do. Next, he went to the People's Hero Monument and brought the 5 cabinet members to pay their respects. This was also the first time the 5 cabinet members made a public appearance, and it was to tell everyone that the cabinet was important and had great power. Next, Yang Chendong started to patrol the factories one by one. In terms of professional ability, Yang Chendong naturally couldn't compare to professionals. However, he had foresight and knowledge that exceeded this world by a few hundred years. Therefore, he either didn't speak, or he could often add the finishing touch, making people feel enlightened. Crimson City was huge, and there were many factories. If Yang Chendong wanted to visit all the large factories and departments, it would take a few months. During this time, the negotiations between Xianxia and Southern Ming finally came to a conclusion. Facing the covetous eyes of the 5-star army, Southern Ming, who wasn't prepared, finally chose to compromise. After Ma Dali and Xia Chong quarreled and argued, all the way until the 10th month of 1467. After more than 3 months of negotiations, Southern Ming finally made a lot of concessions. For example, they allowed Yang Xia to open a bank in Southern Ming, open a shop, and allow him to build a port in Fuzhou and other places near the sea. Ma Dali also represented Bugnam of Gojoseon and said that Yang Xia and Southern Ming would continue to be friends for generations. In the future, Yang Xia would continue to provide food to Southern Ming, and the price wouldn't increase by 50%, but only by 20%, etc. Just like that, the relationship between the two sides went from being at daggers drawn to the current ambiguous relationship. This was really unexpected. After Ma Dali finished the final negotiations, he took a ship back to Crimson City and reported to Yang Chendong. In the political affairs hall of the palace, Yang Chendong said that he had worked hard and that things were done well. This made Ma Dali smile. As if he could see that Yang Chendong was in a good mood, Ma Dali took the opportunity to ask his question. "Sixth young master, the current situation is that our Yang Xia is very strong, and the 5-star army has recovered their fighting strength after 3 months of rest. Why do you still want to negotiate with Southern Ming?" Ma Dali wasn't the only one who wanted to ask this question. Many officials were also filled with doubts. This was because according to Yang Qindong's style of doing things, he had never negotiated with other countries, regions, or powers. If there was a disagreement, he would start a war. Sometimes, he didn't even need an excuse. Yang Qindong knew that it was time to answer this question. Even if he didn't give an answer today, there would still be people who would ask tomorrow. In order to solve the problem once and for all, he said, war stems from politics, and politics is higher than war. Whether a war can be won or not, it can't be measured purely from a military perspective. It also needs to be combined with political factors. Chapter 1627. For example, let's attack the Southern Ming Empire. We can definitely win, but how much will we have to pay? You have to know that in the eyes of many Han people, the Great Ming Empire is still orthodox. Even if they are divided into the Northern and Southern Ming Empires, it is still the same. If the people do not lose their minds, it is not wise to attack rashly. Furthermore, if we take over the Southern Ming Empire by force, not to mention what kind of resistance we will encounter, the Southern Ming Empire will not give up easily. Their destructive power is obvious. As such, if we want to recover and rebuild, we will need to invest a large amount of manpower and resources. As for these, we are not ready yet. This is also the reason why we are negotiating first. Yang Qindong answered Ma Dali's question seriously this time. This caused the other party to continuously nod his head, as if he had thought of something. Sixth young master, in other words, negotiations are only a method. In the end, we might use force. It is not a possibility, but we will definitely use force. Some people are like this. If you only show off your muscles, they will not be afraid and will think that it is just for show. As long as you place a large blade on their neck and let them feel the coldness, they will truly be afraid and lower their heads. Thus, once the Yang Xia has made all the preparations and has enough reasons to convince the world, they will make their move. Speaking to here, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a complicated expression, but he quickly became firm again. As for the reasons needed, someone should be sending it to us soon. Ma Dali naturally did not understand the deeper meaning of Yang Qindong's words. As a qualified official, he had to know what he should know and what he should not inquire about. Otherwise, he would only bring trouble to himself. Yes, sixth young master, this official understands. That's right, before Minister Xie Chong left, he said that the Southern Ming Empire's observation team will soon arrive at Crimson City. Do you think this is a method to attack them? Of course. Yang Qindong nodded and gave an affirmative answer. This observation group will be led by your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You must entertain them well. They are the best propaganda tool. When they return to the Southern Ming Dynasty, they will definitely bring us many unexpected surprises. Yang Qindong grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was a very popular saying that the moon in foreign countries was rounder than in China. Just because of this slogan, who knew how many capable and talented people racked their brains to go abroad? Even if it was to wash dishes or do small jobs there, they were unwilling to return to their motherland. This time, in the eyes of many people in the Southern Ming Empire, Crimson City was a foreign country. It was believed that the saying that the moon in Crimson City was rounder than the moon in the Southern Ming Empire would soon become popular. There's an old saying that goes, guarding the mouths of the people is more dangerous than guarding the rivers. As long as this observation group dared to come, Yang Qindong would let this observation group become Yang Xia's lobbyists in the Southern Ming Dynasty. At that time, the news would spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100, and from 100 to 1,000. There would be a huge problem within the Southern Ming Empire, and this would be the best support for the next attack against the Southern Ming Empire. Just as Yang Qindong and Ma Dali were discussing the matter of the observation group. In the capital of the Southern Ming Empire, Xie Chong had also rushed back, covered in dust. In the palace hall, Xie Chong handed up a memorial. It was the final result of the negotiations with Ma Dali. Although there were many humiliating terms in it that could be said to be humiliating, at least the 5-star army was cut off. For the Southern Ming Empire, this was already considered a good result. Of course, these terms were not equal, and Zhu Qizhan was not foolish enough to make it public. That would be slapping himself and his officials' faces. Thus, after he received the memorial, he changed the topic. My beloved officials, Xianxia has only been developing for a little more than 10 years. However, they have such powerful strength. Why is that? This time, without waiting for Zhu Qizhan to call out names, the officials below automatically stood up. The person leading them was the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. This person was also old and wanted to retire, but in the end, he was urged to stay by Zhu Qizhan. It was not because of anything else, but because there was no one more suitable for this position in the Southern Ming Empire than Wang Zhua. Money and provisions were important, and it was not reassuring to leave it to others. Wang Zhua stood up and replied, "Your Majesty, this subject has always heard that Yangxia's Crimson City's commerce and industry are very developed. It is because of this that they were able to earn a large amount of money in a very short period of time. This must be the foundation of Yangxia's strength." That's right. Although Zhu Qizhan did not want this result, he had to admit that this result was very correct. Thus, he nodded. Minister Wang's words are very true. Yangxia's strength is greater than theirs. They have a strong foundation of money, and their financial resources are very sufficient. This is the reason why they were able to establish such a powerful army. Here comes the problem. What they can do, we can do as well. This time, Minister Xia put in a lot of effort to help us get an observation team. This emperor thinks that we should all go to Crimson City and take a look. We can learn from the enemy and subdue them. Zhu Qizhan credited the matter of the observation group to Xie Chong. In fact, it was Yang Chendong who suggested it. This was the emperor's power play. If it was Yang Chendong who invited everyone, they would only be grateful to Yang Chendong. But if Zhu Qizhan said that he fought for it, then everyone would be grateful to him. As soon as he said this, the officials below began to discuss. The officials in this era did not have many exciting lives. If they did, they would just gather together to watch singing and dancing and drink wine. As for climbing mountains and swimming, only those officials who were not successful could do that. Just like today's officials in the main hall, which one of them did not prepare for court at the 5th watch and enter court at the 6th watch? They woke up so early every day, and some of them did not even have enough time to sleep, yet they still wanted to go and take a look. It was beautiful. But now, there was such an opportunity to go out and take a look. It was a trip at public expense. Previously, there was news that Yangxia would pay for the entire observation group. This was naturally Yang Chendong's own initiative, because he still hoped that these people would become his propagandists and promote Yangxia's power. Naturally, when Zhu Qizhan said this, it was because he wanted Minister Xie Chong to fight for it. Regardless of the reason, to be able to travel at public expense, it was said that Crimson City was very advanced, and there were many good things there, many of which could not be bought in the capital of the Southern Ming Dynasty. Just based on this point, who would not be willing? For a time, many officials in the imperial court were eager to give it a try. They were all thinking about signing up as soon as possible after the imperial court ended. They did not want to be unable to sign up just because the quota was full. That would be too much of a pity. Zhu Qizhan agreed in principle that everyone wanted to go to Crimson City to take a look. Firstly, he wanted to let these people see how Crimson City developed and learn from it. Even if he couldn't learn the essence of it, it would still be beneficial to imitate it and learn it. Secondly, he wanted these officials to feel a sense of urgency. Looking at the development of Crimson City and then looking at themselves, wouldn't they feel guilty? Shouldn't I work hard after coming back? Not only that, Zhu Qizhan himself also wanted to go and take a look. Of course, it was only a thought. He did not have the courage. What if he went to Crimson City and was detained? He definitely did not have Yang Qindong's strength and courage to bring 500 black cavalry and rush into southern Cloud Manor, which had tens of thousands of soldiers from 3 provinces. After the court session ended, the officials who went to the Ministry of Rites to register quickly formed a long line. This made the host, Minister Xiechong, happy but also worried. He was happy because there were so many people going. This made him worry that no one would be interested in going and that the southern Ming dynasty would lose face. However, he was worried because there were too many officials. Would Yang Xia agree? "Sir, what should we do?" Zhou Ziang came to Xiechong's side and asked softly. Clearly, this lively scene was far beyond his expectations. How about this? Quickly go to Yang Xia's bank in the capital and see if you can contact Bugnam of Gojoseon through them. Inform them about our situation and ask them how many people they can allow in the observation group. Okay, this official will go now. Zhou Ziang did not dare to delay and ran out of the Ministry of Rites Yamen. Yang Xia's bank in the capital had existed for a long time. This bank had always been in charge of the southern Ming dynasty's grain transfers. As the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites, Zhou Ziang had been here a few times and quickly found this place. He met the manager in charge and explained the situation. The manager was straightforward. He knew that this was a serious matter and hurriedly used the bank's radio station to report to the Crimson City cabinet. Fortunately, he did not have enough authority. Otherwise, he would have directly reported to Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace. Originally, Zhou Ziang thought that it would take a long time to get the news. Unexpectedly, in less than an hour, the manager came out and gave Zhou Ziang 4 big words: "There is no limit." When Yang Qindong knew that there were many officials in the southern Ming dynasty, he was overjoyed. Why would he limit the number of people? If all the southern Ming dynasty officials came to Crimson City, he could even force them to stay. This way, the southern Ming dynasty would become an empty shell. There would be no need to fight any wars. Of course, this was just a thought. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen would not be so naive. After knowing that there was no limit, Zhou Ziang happily turned and ran. When he returned to the Ministry of Rites Yamen and reported the matter to Minister Xiechong, he was overjoyed. This was because when Zhou Ziang was away, who knew how many people used their connections to find him and asked for a spot in the observation group. However, he did not know what Bugnam of Gojoseon's bottom line was. However, if he did not agree, he would easily offend people. How could he stand in the imperial court? Chapter 1628. Now, with just one sentence, there was no upper limit, and he could explain to all parties. He immediately said to Zhou Ziang and the officials of the Ministry of Rites, "Everyone, spread the news, ha ha ha." Okay, the officials of the Ministry of Rites replied happily. They were not much better than Xiechong. After a while, except for Zhou Ziang, who was not in his position, everyone else received a lot of messages. They were worried about what to do, and now, it was all solved. The news quickly spread, and it attracted the unanimous applause of all the officials. Zhu Qizhen also learned of the news. He thought maliciously that he should send more people to eat Yang Qindong dry. However, after thinking about it carefully, he had no choice but to set a rule. That was, each department could only transfer 2/3 of their officials into the observation group. He did not want everyone to leave and there would be no one to handle the government affairs of the imperial court. As soon as this decree came out, the various departments quickly began to fight. It was all for the half of the quota. Fighting was the norm for the officials of the Great Ming dynasty. Sometimes, when there were benefits, they naturally had to fight. This involved whether they could take the opportunity to develop and become stronger. When there was nothing to do, they also had to fight. They had to show their existence. In short, the Great Ming dynasty's officials had many means of fighting, and it was so complicated that outsiders could not imagine. Now that there was such a good thing, there would naturally be a lot of fighting, and there would not be a result in a short time. This lasted for nearly 10 days. In the end, the winners entered the observation group, and the losers stayed in the yamen with a look of despair. The Ministry of Rights quickly received the list of the officials of the observation group from each department. When the result was calculated, it really gave Xie Chong a shock. When he saw the final result, there were more than 3,600 officials. He stood in place as if he had crashed. Xie Chong was very clear that these were the official members of the observation group. According to the result of his negotiation with Madali, each official could bring 3 family members. The usual arrangement was 1 wife and 1 son and 1 daughter. In other words, on the list of 3,600 people, there were 4 times, and there were nearly 15,000 people. Xie Chong couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of so many people eating and drinking. He felt that this time, Yang Chendong had smashed his own foot with a stone. Zhu Qizhen also saw this name and couldn't help but chuckle. He then said to Qian Sengbao, "Tell Xie Chong to do it this way." At this moment, Zhu Qizhen was still thinking. This time, there were already so many rank 5 officials and above in the capital. If he had known earlier, he would have set the rank of officials to rank 7. That way, the number of officials would at least double. This would put a lot of pressure on Yang Xie's finances. But it was just a thought. For officials with too low a rank, even if they went to Crimson City, with their ability, the things they could learn would be limited. Besides, 15,000 people was already a lot. The emperor agreed, and the name list of the 15,000-strong observer group was quickly sent to Yang Chendong. At this time, he was talking with Yu Qian and Shen Yu about the reception of the observer group. When he saw the final number of people, Yu Qian's face couldn't help but darken. Yu Qian was famous for being upright. Seeing the number of people in the observer group, he began to feel some heartache about the financial expenses. Even Shen Yu's face was ugly and a little red. He was embarrassed for the southern Ming officials. Did they take advantage of the situation? Did they have any shame? On the other hand, Yang Chendong didn't have the slightest displeasure. On the contrary, he was very happy as he muttered to himself, 15,000 people isn't a lot. I don't know what kind of influence it will have by borrowing their mouths. King, what did you say? Yu Qian and Shen Yu didn't hear clearly and asked curiously. Oh, nothing. This king said that they are all children of the great Han Dynasty. We have to properly receive them. As the host, we can't be stingy. Pavilion elders, you can first estimate how much silver is needed to entertain the guests. Yang Chendong waved his hand and asked indifferently. Yu Qian and Shen Yu, who had done some work in advance, had prepared 500,000 taels for this matter. This was already not a small amount. However, they didn't expect the number of people in the observer group to be so large. Just the transport ships sent out were more than 10. After all, they had to leave enough space. They couldn't make it crowded after inviting people. Wouldn't that be contrary to their original intention? That, 2 million taels. Shen Yu first glanced at Yu Qian, then carefully probed with a question. However, when he saw Yang Chendong frown, he quickly changed his words, 1,500,000 taels is also fine. If it's any less, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach our initial goal. No, it's not that the difference is too big, but it's too little. Since it was us who took the initiative to invite them over, since we had the intention of letting them advertise our 5-star army, how could we be too petty? How about this, we'll give you 5 million taels as the basic cost. If it's not enough, we'll add more. In addition, we'll give you 370,000 Yang coins to ensure that every official will receive 100 Yang coins to buy the items they want. The Yang dollar was the highest currency in the Yang system. There was no other currency that could compare to it. In principle, Yang Xie coins weren't allowed to be exchanged. There was only one way to obtain them, and that was to receive a certain amount of money from the Yang Xie officials. Furthermore, those who had made great contributions to Yang Xia would receive additional rewards. With Yang coins, one could purchase the items they wanted from the Yang department store in Crimson City. The items here only accepted Yang coins. In other words, without Yang coins, even if you brought out a mountain of gold or silver, you wouldn't be able to buy anything from there. On the other hand, the items in the Yang department store couldn't be seen from the outside. For example, there were the best cosmetics, exquisite watches, practical binoculars, high-class Chinese tunic suits and cheongsams with unique numbers printed on them, as well as high heels for women and shiny leather jackets for men. There were also exquisite palm-sized mirrors decorated with beautiful eyes, mini Buddha statues, Guanyin statues, and so on that could be hung in front of one's chest. There were even more high-end items, such as flashlights and sewing machines, bicycles, electric scooters, and so on. In short, they were items that didn't have high production capacity or were laborious to produce. These weren't like ordinary mirrors, glass products, soap, perfume, toothpaste, and other items that could be casually exported. Instead, they were only sold in the Yang department store. Many of the newly developed Yang Xia products were placed in the Yang department store by Yeshen. They were only waiting for people with Yang coins to buy them. Once they had a certain amount of production capacity, they could be exported. Such goods would naturally be taken off the shelves. Because of this, the exchange value of Yang coins was very high in the market. Often, 100 taels could be exchanged for 1 Yang coin. This was why there was a price but no market. When Yu Qian and Shen Yu heard that Yang Chendong had taken out so many things at once, their eyes widened. They knew that Yang Chendong attached great importance to this matter, but they didn't expect it to be so important that he would take out 370,000 just for Yang coins. Every southern Ming official received more than 100 Yang coins. It had to be known that even the two elders only received 100 Yang coins a month after their salary. As for the lower-level officials, they only received a few dozen Yang coins. There were even some who received a dozen Yang coins a month. This is a big deal. After a round of exclamations, even Yu Qian, who had always treated money like dirt, couldn't help but sigh. Very satisfied with the two elders' performance, Yang Chendong chuckled. If that's the case, are the two elders confident in completing the task? No problem. Yu Qian and Shen Yu stood up at the same time. At this moment, their hearts were filled with great confidence. Yang Xia had made all kinds of preparations. Under the expectations of the southern Ming officials, 10 modified tourist boats arrived at the Suzhou port not far from Nanjing. Here, nearly 15,000 southern Ming officials were waiting. According to the agreement between the two sides, the Suzhou port was being built, but there was still some time before it could be used. To get on the boat, one needed to walk over a ladder, so everyone had to be careful when getting on the boat. They were afraid that they would accidentally step on air and hurt their feet. After everyone boarded the tourist boat, the interior space was spacious and the view was excellent. In particular, one of the guest rooms was equipped with a large Simmons soft mattress, which made it extremely comfortable for people to lie on. At this moment, Wang Zhicheng's butt sank into the mattress as he clicked his tongue in wonder. Before this, Wang Zhicheng had already seen the world. As the eldest grandson of the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, what kind of good things had he not seen since he was young? Even though he had been to the imperial palace a few times with his grandfather, when he lay on the mattress, he still felt like Granny Lu who had just entered the palace for the first time. Everyone says that Yang Xia is very rich and that the progress of society is more civilized and advanced. Could it be that this isn't just a legend? Wang Zhicheng said as he lightly stroked the mattress. Bang! The door suddenly opened from the outside. Then, a girl around the same age as Wang Zhicheng, around 14 or 15 years old, rushed in. As soon as she entered the room, she yelled, "Brother, did you go into the bathroom? What are you doing? Don't you know that you have to knock before entering someone's room? You're already so old, yet you're still so rude." Although he was scolding her, his words were not harsh. It showed his tolerance and generosity towards the girl in front of him. The girl's name was Wang Shang. She was the granddaughter of Minister Wang Zhua and Wang Zhicheng's sister. Perhaps because they were siblings and they were too familiar with each other, Wang Shang did not take her brother's words seriously. Instead, she continued to chatter, "Brother, did you see the bathroom?" What bathroom? What is that? Is it a person's name?" Wang Zhicheng's face was filled with confusion. Chapter 1629. Humph. I knew you hadn't seen it before. Wang Shang snorted. She knew her brother very well. He was very smart and had a lot of ideas, but there was one thing about him. He was too meticulous in doing things. He had a slow personality. She thought that her brother must not have had time to go to the washroom, so she purposely came to show off. "Brother, come here. I'll tell you what the washroom is, what's here, and how to use it." Wang Shang pulled Wang Zhicheng's hand and led him to the side of the room. After a full 10 minutes, Wang Zhicheng walked out of the washroom as if he was in a dream. After showing off, Wang Shang also left the room to find her sisters. Wang Zhicheng, who was left behind, was a little confused. The items in the bathroom just now had really shocked him. For example, the expensive shampoo, shower gel, the porcelain bathtub that was big enough for him to lie down in, and the toilet that could be flushed at any time. With Wang Zhicheng's family background, he had experienced these things before, but they were completely different from the things here. Take the bathtub for example. There was a faucet on the side. When you turned it to the left, it was cold water. When you turned it to the right, it was hot water. It was really very convenient. It was far different from his own home, where he had to boil water in advance to take a bath. When the water turned cold, he had to ask the servants to refill it. It was just a ship that was welcoming them, but the room was already so luxurious. Wang Zhicheng couldn't help but wonder what it would be like when they arrived at Yangtze's capital, Qiqian City. In fact, Wang Zhicheng wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Many people in the same industry had such thoughts. They were looking forward to the rest of the journey. It would take a few more days to get from Suzhou to Qiqian City. There were still things happening in Qiqian City. For example, a guest was welcomed in the palace. It wasn't exactly a guest. It should be said that it was a member of the family. He was Yang Chendong's fourth brother, Yang Yang. Among the brothers, Yang Yang was the most useless existence in Baiming. When his brothers had things to do, he became a good-for-nothing. He went to restaurants every day to walk birds, giving people the impression that he had nothing to do. In the end, Yang Yang was just born at the wrong time. He still had some ability and insight. This could be seen from the fact that he had condescended to create sixth brother early on. Sure enough, after deciding to follow Yang Chendong, Yang Yang's life changed. She held great power and became Yang Xie's spokesperson in the southern Ming dynasty. Not only did she receive the respect of countless people, she could get whatever she wanted with just a stretch of her hand. She truly lived the life of a deity. If he hadn't been assassinated by a ninja, he would still be in the southern Ming Empire and wouldn't be willing to return to Kaisan City. This was not to say that Yang Yang did not like Qiqian City. In terms of facilities, Qiqian City was much better than the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. However, since he was back here, he had to abide by the rules of the southern Ming dynasty. For Yang Yang, who was used to freedom, it was more comfortable in the southern Ming dynasty. He could do whatever he wanted. It had been a while since Yang Chendong returned to Qiqian City. During this time, the two brothers had met, but time was too tight and they only exchanged a few words. Now that Yang Chendong had done all the important things he should have done, he slowly became free. This fourth brother came to visit again and this family banquet was held. Since it was a family banquet, there naturally wouldn't be any idle people. Even the few servants of the Yang family didn't come. The only ones sitting at the table were Yang Chendong, Hu Yan, and Yang Yang. Hu Yan was the princess consort. When Yang Chendong wasn't in Kuqian City, her status had always been high. Letting her sit with him expressed Yang Chendong's respect for his fourth brother. If there was no wife accompanying him, it would be a brotherly banquet. Your sister-in-law didn't come. Otherwise, you two would be able to talk. Yang Yang looked at Hu Yan and chuckled. Then fourth brother can send someone to bring sister-in-law over when you have time, Hu Yan replied with a smile. Alright, I'll send someone to do that. Yang Yang heartily laughed. Then, he looked at Yang Chendong. He took the initiative to raise his wine glass and said with a sigh, "Sixth brother, although I am your elder brother, I am convinced by what you have done. Come, let me toast you." Fourth brother, please." Yang Chendong laughed heartily and toasted his brother. Although one was his fourth brother and the other was his sixth brother, the disparity in status made Yang Yang no longer dare to act like an elder brother. Over the years, Yang Chendong had proven his ability with facts. Not only did Yang Yang feel pressured when he saw Yang Chendong, he even felt restrained sometimes. Even big brother Yang Gong, second brother Yang Rang, third brother Yang Shi, and fifth brother Yang Guifang, who were far away in the capital of northern Ming, felt the same way. Once they saw the current Yang Chendong, they would also feel the pressure increase. After toasting with Yang Chendong felt a little more confident. At the very least, he didn't feel that Yang Chendong was estranged from his fourth brother. This gave him the confidence to say the words he had prepared because he truly wanted to do something and help Yang Chendong. Before he could think of a way to say it, Yang Chendong took the lead and asked, "Fourth brother, are your injuries okay?" Don't worry, the assassination attempt happened in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. They must express their sincerity and compensate you personally. Because of an assassination attempt, the southern Ming dynasty had to compensate him. Only Yang Chendong had the confidence to say these words. If it was someone else, they would at most receive a few words of comfort. As for others, it was better not to think about it. It was just a daydream. Yang Yang used this as an opening and laughed. Then he patted his chest and said, "Fourth brother, my body is very good. Sixth brother doesn't need to worry. As for compensation, you can decide. I have saved some money over the years, so I don't really care. But speaking of this matter, the southern Ming dynasty has contacted me in private." "Oh, they contacted you in private?" As if it was the first time he heard about this matter, Yang Chendong picked up a piece of cauliflower and put it in his mouth. Yang Chendong had already trained himself to not show his emotions on his face. Sometimes, he would smile, but no one knew what he was thinking in his heart. "Yes, they contacted me." Yang Yang didn't look at Yang Chendong's expression. Instead, he said, "The person who contacted me has a big background." "Big background? Then it must be a big shot." Let me guess." Yang Chendong's lips curled slightly. Some fragments of his mind couldn't help but faintly connect. Seeing that Yang Chendong wanted to guess, Yang Yang also became interested. "Okay, then sixth brother can guess." Yang Chendong didn't let Yang Yang wait for long before he spat out 3 words, "Manager Chow." Yang Yang's eyes flashed with astonishment. Then, he couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "Fourth brother is amazing. It is indeed Chao Jixiang. He is now the manager of the southern Ming dynasty's Imperial Guard." Following that, Yang Yang spilled everything he knew, as well as what Chao Jixiang's men had told him. As for this Chao Jixiang, although he has a high position and power in the southern Ming dynasty, that is only on the surface. Right now, he is not too favored by the Ying sect. Moreover, there is an additional Qian Sengbao above him. This person has gotten together with another head eunuch, Kai Zhong, and is constantly squeezing his living space. As a result, Chao Jixiang is currently in a difficult situation. Thus, he used the assassination to contact me. On the surface, it seems like he is apologizing, but in reality, he is intending to rely on me and change his allegiance. Fourth brother, I can feel it. Originally, I did not want to pay attention to them, but now, I feel that it is an opportunity. I think that this is a trap. Yang Chendong really wanted to say this, but he didn't. Because he needed people to enter his trap, he could only pretend that he didn't know anything. However, no one knew better than him what kind of person Chao Jixiang was in history and how much trust he had received from the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Speaking of Zhu Qizhen, he trusted the people around him, especially the eunuchs, who seemed to have no bottom line. In history, even though he was tricked by Wang Zhen and lost the Tumu castle, after the Ying sect's restoration, he issued an edict to clear Wang Zhen's name and used incense wood to summon spirits. In the capital, he built a Jingzhong shrine in the northern courtyard of the Wisdom Temple to worship spirits. Chao Jixiang had once been under Wang Zhen's tutelage. In the eyes of the Ying sect, he was one of Wang Zhen's substitutes. In history, he had plotted with General Shi Heng and Cabinet Grand Secretary Su Yozhen to lead troops to welcome the Ying sect's restoration. His contributions were even greater, and he was rewarded with large amounts of land and land. He also assisted in the military affairs of the capital. Chao Jixiang's nephews, Chao Xian and Chao Duo, were appointed as hereditary commanders of the Genie Guards, and were gradually promoted to become military governors. The number of people under Chao Jixiang's command who were able to become officials numbered in the hundreds and thousands. There were many officials in the court who relied on Chao Jixiang in hopes of being promoted. Chao Jixiang had a lot of power at that time, and together with Shi Heng, they were called Chao Shi. It wasn't impossible for such a person to betray the Ying sect. However, if he betrayed Zhu Qizhen and fled to the Yangtze, he was not trustworthy at all. Looking at the Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace, apart from the guards in charge of security, there were no other men. There were no eunuchs at all. It had to be said that Yang Chendong did not have a good impression of eunuchs. This was because in history, many bad things happened because of them. However, Yang Chendong had interacted with eunuchs before. For example, the head eunuch Mao Mu, who was serving the empress in the southern Ming Palace, was one of Yang Chendong's men. From time to time, he would send important information. However, on the surface, Yang Chendong did not have any eunuchs by his side. In such an environment, if Chao Jixiang wanted to join the Yangtze, what could he do? He did not have a position for himself, so why would he surrender? It was not easy for him to escape from Beiming to the southern Ming dynasty and join the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Why would he betray once more? Chapter 1630. And even if all of this was true, how could Yang Chendong believe a person who could betray him at any time? Yang Chendong was familiar with the history of the Great Ming Dynasty. Even though Yang Chendong didn't seem to care much about the Great Ming Dynasty, and Chao Jixiang was also a guard of the Imperial Secret Service. He was very mysterious and came and went without a trace. However, Yang Chendong also knew this person very well. It was because of this understanding that he was very sure that this person would never betray the southern Ming dynasty's emperor, Zhu Qizhen, nor would he surrender like Yang Yang said. All of this was just a trap. With a plan in mind, Yang Chendong pretended that he didn't know anything and said to Yang Yang, "Fourth brother, this is a good thing. Since that's the case, you can continue to contact him. If you need help, whether it's the Security Bureau or the CIA, we will do our best to help." This was exactly what Yang Yang wanted to hear. He also wanted to make some achievements. He immediately said happily, "It just so happens that there are people sent by Chao Jixiang in the observation group. When the time comes, I will have a good chat with him." Seeing Yang Chendong's excited expression, Yang Chendong couldn't bear to dampen his enthusiasm. He also wanted to see what kind of trap the other party had set. He didn't believe that Yang Chendong would betray him. With the other party's ability, even if something happened to him, it was impossible for him to rise to the position of Xianxia. In other words, there would only be disadvantages and no benefits. Thus, Yang Chendong also wanted to see who else was involved in this matter. Of course, even if this matter didn't happen, Yang Chendong already had a rough understanding in his heart. He only needed to wait for the other party to set up the trap. At that time, he would let the person who set up the trap know what it meant to seek death. Yang Chendong was holding a family banquet in the palace. Because Yang Wu was in charge of the palace's affairs, he had been accompanying him. In a small courtyard outside the palace, Cui Xiu left the palace with the excuse of not feeling well. She came to see Yang Lu, who had been waiting for a long time. "How was it? No one noticed you when you came out, right?" After seeing Cui Xiu appear, Yang Lu sat on a chair and asked with an unpleasant expression. Over the years, Yang Lu had hardly exercised his body. Moreover, he had indulged in eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. His body was no longer as good as before. Reporting to Master, "No. The 8th Madam can't wait to see me." As soon as I said I wasn't feeling well, she immediately approved my leave. Cui Xiu put away the arrogant attitude she had in the palace. At this moment, she was as docile as an obedient lamb. It couldn't be helped, the lives of Cui Xiu's parents and 2 older brothers were in the hands of Yang Lu, and if she were to offend him, her family would immediately be destroyed. What she didn't know was that her family had already been killed by Yang Lu. Speaking of which, Yang Lu didn't have the time to send a few people to keep an eye on Cui Xiu's family. Besides, it was difficult for the living to keep a secret. Only the dead were the most reassuring. "Very good, you did well." Yang Lu still had some understanding of the ways of a master. He knew that if he praised his subordinates properly, they would be full of enthusiasm. "You can rest assured that your family is now very safe. They have food and drink, and they are living very well. When the matter is done, you will be given a large sum of money, and you can reunite with your family." "Thank you, Master." When she heard that she could reunite with her family, Cui Xiu's eyes flashed with yearning. The reason why she did these things was for the safety of her family. "Well, you tell me, is there anything unusual about the 8th Madam?" When it came to business, Yang Lu, who was sitting on the chair, was a lot straighter. Reporting to Master, the 8th Madam has completely lost power. Bugnam of Gojoseon has been back for so long, and he has not come to the 8th Madam's palace. Even Princess Yangxian has not seen her father for so long. When Cui Xiu answered this question, her tone was very firm. Perhaps adults can deceive people, but a 6-year-old child can't deceive her. This answer was the same as the result of Yang Lu's analysis. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "It seems that Bugnam of Gojoseon really regards the 8th Madam as the backing behind the ninjas. This is the best, he will not suspect others because of this. But you still have to keep an eye on it. If there is any movement, tell me immediately." "Yes, Master." Cui Xiu replied respectfully. "Good. By the way, did Yang Wu find anything?" Thinking of his brother, Yang Lu's eyes had a trace of hesitation. He admitted that this time he took advantage of the feelings between brothers, but there was no other way. With the smuggling he did, once Yang Chendong found out, it would be difficult for him to survive. At that time, even if the other brothers pleaded for him, the result would not change. Over the years, Yang Lu thought that he understood Yang Chendong. This person had his own principles when doing things. Anyone who was willing to step on the line, no matter what kind of merits they had in the past, would be heavily punished. And what he did was not as simple as stepping on the line, it was simply challenging Yang Chendong's bottom line. There would definitely not be a good result. Even so, he could only give it a try. If he won, then he would reach the peak of his life. On the other hand, if he lost, he would just die. Even if he waited, he would still die. If there was still a chance, why not? As such, Yang Lu's outlook on life was completely distorted. When asked about Yang Wu, Cui Xiu replied truthfully, "This person, other than being a little lecherous, really doesn't have any other shortcomings. After observing for a while, I found that Yang Wu is not a greedy person. He never accepts gifts, and basically there is no abuse of power, so it is really difficult to threaten him." Yes, it is very difficult. Yang Lu couldn't help but sigh after listening. He had thought of dragging Yang Wu down more than once. It must be said that this person's position in Crimson City was too stable, and his influence was great. If he had his help, many things would be much smoother, and he wouldn't have to be so careful today. For example, if Yang Wu was willing to cooperate with him, he could completely control the palace. Then, for the safety of his wife and child, Yang Hodong would have to bow down. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anything to use against him after searching for a long time. And if he were to say something rashly, not only would Yang Wu not help him, he might even report him to the young master. If that was the case, all the planning would be meaningless. Although it is very difficult, we still have to try. Let's continue searching. I don't believe that he won't be greedy when he has such great power. And as long as we find him, our big plan will succeed. Yang Lu still didn't give up. I understand. Cui Xiu nodded and agreed. Then, Cui Xiu left. A figure flashed in the small courtyard, and Yang Ying walked out from the darkness. Yang Ying, do you think it's possible to persuade Yang Wu to work for us? Seeing Yang Ying, Yang Lu didn't straighten his body, and instead collapsed, as comfortable as possible. A look of disgust flashed across Yang Ying's eyes as he stared at Yang Lu's body that was as soft as mud. Even Yang Lu didn't know that his real identity was a secret agent of the Southern Ming Brocade Guard, and was directly under the command of the factory guard, Chao Jixiang. In the entire Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard, only Chao Jixiang knew his identity. This was the greatest way to prevent his identity from being exposed. Facts also proved that all these years, ever since he sided with Yang Lu, and became the most trusted butler step by step, no one doubted his identity. And Yang Lu could be where he was today, it was all because of his help. A young man with ambition had turned into a gluttonous, lazy, and greedy person who was afraid of death. Many times, Yang Ying looked down on Yang Lu. This was because if the two of them were in different positions, he would never betray his master. This was one of the 5 servants of Bugnam of Gojoseon, and his identity was extremely noble. As long as he didn't court death, he would definitely live a life of glory. However, he didn't have the ability, and yet he still wanted to achieve great things. Why didn't he take a piss and look at himself in the mirror? For someone like Yang Lu, even if he was a small 7th-ranked county official, he wouldn't be able to manage a county well. Yet he still wanted to be like Yang Chendong, a prince of the great Ming dynasty. He really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although he looked down on him in his heart, before the mission was completed, he was still very respectful on the surface. He lowered his head and said, "Master, it's too difficult to persuade Yang Wu, and the risk is too great. It's better to abandon this idea for now. The Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group is about to arrive, and there's also a secret agent from the Southern Ming Brocade Guard following them. He will come in contact with Yang Yang, so we should do a good job in writing this article. Yes, we still have to use Yang Yang first. Speaking of which, this person is an idiot. He doesn't even know that he's being used, huh?" Speaking of Yang Yang, Yang Lu laughed loudly. However, how could he know that in Yang Ying's eyes, he was also an idiot? After the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group was bumpy on the sea for a few days, they finally appeared outside the new pier of Crimson City. Because of Yang Chendong's importance, in order to welcome them, Yu Qian and Shen Yu did a lot of work. When they knew that the observation group was about to arrive at the new pier, 2 old officials and a group of Yang Xia officials stood outside the pier to welcome them. On the new pier, there were many street lamps, and the cement steps were painted with a layer of gold paint. It looked very magnificent. In front of the pier, a military band was wearing brand new military uniforms and standing in formation, playing the song, Our Great Han, adapted from Our Great Ming Dynasty. Under the passionate rhythm, there was a group of youths wearing white and blue school uniforms standing at the side with flower garlands in their hands. They were all primary school students from the Yang Family Academy, and they were here to present flowers to the observation group. Chapter 1631. Apart from the military band and children, there were also a group of policemen in police uniforms. They were here to maintain law and order. After all, there were close to 15,000 members of the South Ming Observer Group, and their safety had to be guaranteed. Because of this, one of the elders, Chief Police Long Tainan, had also come. 3 of the 5 elders had come, which was enough to show how much importance Xianxia placed on the South Ming Observer Group. Apart from the policemen, there were some officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as some commoners who had come to watch. It was not entirely accurate to say that they were commoners. Most of them were representatives chosen by their respective units to welcome the guests. They were all dressed in neat and tidy clothes, and their figures were tall and straight. The men were mostly handsome, and the women were mostly beautiful. Every single one of them was full of energy, displaying the demeanor of the Han people of Crimson City. Apart from these Han people, there was also a welcoming group of 500 people. Among them, there were white-skinned, black-skinned, yellow-haired, red-haired, and blue-eyed people. They were all people who had been conquered by Xianxia, and they were the ones who had performed well. Placing them here was a testament to the strength of the Yang faction and the nobility of the Han people. The welcoming group had more people than the observer group, and there were close to 20,000 of them. But even so, the plaza in front of Crimson City's new pier still didn't seem crowded. Just last year, the docks had undergone another expansion. Not to mention that there were only 30 to 40,000 people. Even if there were 100,000 people here, it would not be a problem. Everything on the pier had been seen clearly by the observer group. Seeing this scene, as a member of the observer group, they were naturally filled with pride. After all, no matter who went to a foreign place, they would want to be welcomed and not rolled their eyes. However, there were some people, mainly the South Ming officials, who maintained a smile on their faces, but their hearts were beating like drums. Why were the people welcoming them so energetic? Could these people really be ordinary people, and not the nobles and gentry in the city? Thinking about the state of the South Ming people, they were not starving. Although they wouldn't starve to death, most of them were emaciated and their eyes were lifeless. They were like walking corpses. How could they be as energetic as the people who greeted them? Could it be a disguise? At this moment, there were clearly many people who had such thoughts. The officials all decided to wait until they entered Crimson City to take a good look. Whether it was real or fake, they would be able to tell. The ship finally reached the shore, and the people who walked out from the first ship were the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Personnel, Chen Sun, and the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. The fact that they were able to join the observer group was their own idea, as well as the idea of the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen. One of them was in charge of the officials, while the other was in charge of the country's finances. This time, they came with the attitude of learning. He wanted to see how Xianxia managed to accumulate so much money and food, and how he used his men. Speaking of which, both Yu Qian and Shen Yu knew these too. Especially since Yu Qian's position in the past was basically the same as theirs. When this old friend met, he naturally went up to greet him with a smile. Seeing Yu Qian and Shen Yu walk over, whether it was Chen Sun or Wang Zhua, their expressions were somewhat unnatural. In the past, they all belonged to the Great Ming Dynasty, but now, they all had their own masters. More importantly, Yu Qian and Shen Yu were clearly doing better. When they were on the ship, Xia's people told them about the general situation in Crimson City, and they mentioned the words of the 5th cabinet elder. Thinking about it, he was already a cabinet elder, but they were still only ministers. In addition, the southern Ming dynasty was currently in a precarious situation, while Xianxia was at the peak of his power. The gap between the two sides would only be even greater. Especially that Shenyu. In the past, he was simply a nobody in their eyes, a low-ranking official. But now, he had become one of the Xia's cabinet elders, and he held the power of life and death in his hands. If one studied the huge territory of Xianxia, they would know that their real power was even greater than the king of a small country. Comparing oneself to others was indeed infuriating. Welcome, welcome. Yu Qian and Shenyu smiled and extended their right hands to Chen Sun and Wang Zhua. They were in other people's territory, and this time, they were here to learn from them. The two ministers did not dare to be careless. They also quickly extended their right hands, and then the four of them shook hands. The etiquette of shaking hands was not in the great Ming dynasty, but at this moment, everyone followed suit without any feeling of disharmony. It was no wonder that this etiquette was accepted by the people in the future. After Sun and Wang Zhua, the Minister of Right Xie Chong, the Minister of Justice Xiao Chua, the Minister of Works Wei Luo, the Minister of War Kuang Yi, and the Imperial Censor Shang Lu all came down from the other ships. Both sides greeted each other and greeted each other. What a big lineup. After the Minister of War Kuang Yi got down from the ship, his expression was somewhat ugly. In his view, this was clearly Xia's show of strength. Bringing so many people, if this was not a show of force, what was it? Kuang Yi was a veteran, and because he was in charge of the Ministry of War, his temper was naturally worse than the average person's. Now that the southern Ming dynasty was about to clash with Xianxia, one could imagine how much pressure he was under. His reaction was within everyone's expectations. Yu Qian and Shenyu looked at each other and did not pursue the matter. Instead, they chuckled. Then they said, "This is our king's wish. Whether you are willing or not, you have to abide by our rules. If not, please go back. The ship is right there, ready to leave at any time." Kuang Yi choked and wanted to turn around and leave. However, when he thought of his mission, he forced himself to endure it. He let out a cold snort and did not say anything else. The other ministers smiled awkwardly. They were not as unreasonable as Kuang Yi, so naturally, they would not stand with him, nor would they turn around and leave. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Qian smiled and said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's follow the arrangements. Come, bring out the flowers." As soon as his voice fell, the primary school students who had been standing there for a while came forward with garlands in their hands. When they arrived in front of the officials, they tiptoed and put the garlands in their hands around the necks of the officials. Adults were always the most tolerant towards children. Not to mention such cute primary school students. They did not want anything, but to give the wreaths. Therefore, this segment was completed very smoothly. After that, a row of prepared trams drove to the plaza in front of the pier. The members of the observation group entered the trams in batches. When they entered the trams, the members of the observation group all had curious expressions on their faces. Even Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, and the other high-ranking officials were no exception. Clearly, they were very curious about the things in front of them. Rows of clean seats were placed in front of them. When they sat down, they felt the softness of the sponge. Then, a clear glass appeared in front of them, allowing them to see everything from the inside out. When the members of the observation group entered the trams one by one, the first tram started and slowly drove out of the plaza, heading straight to Qiqian City. At this moment, screams of surprise rose and fell one after another. Whether it was the people sitting in the first tram or the people in the other trams, when they saw that the trams that were not pulled by horses or pushed by people began to slowly move on the main road, they all screamed in surprise. People always had a fear of the unknown. Especially when the appearance of an object exceeded people's imagination, that feeling of fear would be even more intense. The members of the observation group screamed in surprise. No matter what rank the officials were, they all screamed inaudibly at this moment. They might be excited, surprised, or afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Fortunately, in each tram, in addition to the necessary driver, there was also a young and beautiful female soldier in Xianxia. She wore a military uniform and looked valiant and formidable. Their voices sounded in a timely manner and began to explain the principles of the trams, explaining why the trams could move on their own. Although no one could really understand the principles that these female soldiers explained, at least everyone knew that this was not the result of magic. Everything was the result of scientific progress. Finally, some of the commotion was suppressed, and the members began to curiously observe the things inside and outside the trams. Wang's family of 4 was also in a tram that was starting to move. The tram moved slowly on the main road, and as it got closer to Qiqian City, the number of tall buildings in the surroundings began to increase. What a beautiful city! It's even more beautiful than our capital. It's clean and the air is so good. Sitting in the row behind them, granddaughter Wang Shang said excitedly. That's right, it's really beautiful here. His wife, Wang Songshi, also sighed on the side. Her eyes were constantly changing with the surrounding scenery. The eldest grandson, Wang Zhicheng, who had always been calm, also pointed outside and shouted inaudibly, "Look, what's that? It's so fast, one person can fly away." Needless to say, Wang Zhicheng must have seen the bicycle on the bicycle path beside the tram. Although things like this were not widespread in the entire Qiqian city, at least some people could already afford it. Therefore, there was now an army of bicycles on the main road. This thing can even pull a person. That's amazing. Big brother, buy one too and pull me along, okay? Wang Shang was clearly shocked. Then, her face filled with joy as she pulled Wang Zhicheng's arm with a pleading look. Alright, if we can buy it, we will definitely buy one. Wang Zhicheng also made a solemn vow. Chapter 1632. Big Brother is the best. After receiving his promise, Wang Shang's beautiful eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. When Minister Wang Zhuo heard all of this, his heart was filled with complex emotions. He had only just entered Crimson City, but it had already brought him too many surprises and unknowns. At this moment, he didn't know if this was a good or bad thing, but after seeing his grandson and granddaughter's performance, he had a faint feeling that Crimson City was too powerful and too rich. It was precisely because of this wealth and power that he had an indescribable curiosity and attraction to young people. He really didn't know if this curiosity was a good thing or a bad thing. However, he couldn't stop this at all. In fact, it wasn't just Wang Zhuo who had such thoughts. Many of the Southern Ming officials in the observation group also had the same attitude. Among them, the shallow ones only saw the shock brought by the things in front of them, while the far-sighted ones saw the changes in the people around them and began to think deeply. Minister of War Kuang Yi was also sitting in a carriage. What was different was that the people around him weren't family members, but rather 3 young generals in the Southern Ming army. One of them was a chili arch, while the other 2 were centurions. From this point alone, it could be seen that Kuang Yi was definitely a good official who wholeheartedly served the court. Previously, Kuang Yi had a lot of dealings with Yang Chendong, and he had always fully supported Yang Chendong. That was because at that time, Yang Xie hadn't said anything. Yang Chendong's actions were also to help the Southern Ming people quell the uprising. It was precisely because of this opportunity that Yang Chendong walked out of Baiming, defeated the Southern Ming, and openly went to Crimson City to obtain everything he had now. However, no matter how powerful Yang Xie was, in Kuang Ye's eyes, Yang Chendong was still a subject of the Great Ming. Whenever the Great Ming needed him, he should be called upon. However, all of this was just a matter of course. Why should everything he worked so hard for be unconditionally handed over to the court? If the imperial court was a court that truly cared about the people, perhaps Yang Chendong would really consider it. However, the current southern Ming dynasty was filled with officials who were greedy and greedy. In the eyes of most people, there was only a small plot of land in front of them. How many people truly cared about the livelihood of the common people? Moreover, history has already told us that the Han people studied the path of the Golden Mean. In history, other than the Han dynasty, there were very few examples of expansion. In the few wars with foreign countries, they only won and then returned. There was no thought of going out at all. In this way, it would be fine if they didn't encounter a powerful enemy, but if they did, what would happen to the common people? In later generations, there was often a saying that the first class was a foreigner, the second class was a government official, the third class was a minor citizen, and the fourth class was a Han. At that time, Yang Chendong was weak and could only watch. But now that he had this kind of ability, he had to make changes. He had to conquer more territory for the Han people and let the Han people become the people at the top of the pyramid in this world. Kuang Yi naturally didn't know what Yang Chendong was thinking. Even if he knew, he probably wouldn't agree. This wasn't surprising. In the eyes of most of the great Ming officials, other than the Ming dynasty, the rest of the world was uncivilized. What was the use of occupying uncivilized people? Moreover, it would waste a lot of money. Kuang Yi couldn't imagine that war was also the best way to plunder money. As long as it was done well and the war was won, the dividends would be very generous. Unfortunately, the Ming people didn't know this. They only saw the wealth used to mobilize the army and didn't see the spoils after the war was won. Therefore, at this moment, Kuang Yi and Yang Chendong's ideas had undergone a serious change. Especially when Kuang Yi saw that Yang Xia wanted to make a move on the southern Ming dynasty. Under the heavy pressure, the friendship between the two of them was completely lost. This was also why Kuang Yi didn't have a good expression when he got off the ship. This time, following the observation group to Crimson City was also Kuang Yi's last effort. He wanted to talk to Yang Chendong about the southern Ming dynasty. Although it was unlikely that there would be any good results, Kuang Yi was still willing to give it a try. "Sir, this Crimson City is different from our southern Ming dynasty cities." The only chiliarch accompanying them, Kuhong, said carefully. How could the black-faced Kuang Yi not see it? However, at this moment, he didn't know what to say. He could only remind him again, look more and speak less. Especially the army camp in the city. You must go in and take a look. Yes. But. Kuhong's face revealed a trace of difficulty. This wasn't the southern Ming dynasty. Their identities as military officials were useless. If it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's permission, trespassing into the army camp would be a capital offense. Knowing what Kuhong was worried about, Kuang Yi waved his hand and said, "No matter, I will talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon about this matter. I will fight for you." The moment he said that, it was clear that Kuang Yi didn't have much confidence in this matter. Speaking of which, he was the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, the Minister of War, a lower-class rank 1 official, which was already quite impressive. However, if Yang Chendong didn't care about him, there was nothing he could do. Hearing Kuang Yi's words, Kuhong and the other two didn't say anything else. Instead, they looked out of the window with curious gazes. The scenery constantly changed. The carriage entered the city and finally stopped in front of the Yangxia Hotel. Speaking of the Yangxia Hotel, it was built 3 years ago. Because the Yang family's territory and influence had expanded greatly, the Yang family Grand Hotel was built on the largest scale when it was first built. It took up a few hundred hectares of land, and many of the surrounding buildings were demolished. After 3 years, it was finally completed. It was opened last month. The entire hotel was 8 stories high, and there were more than 20,000 bedrooms. There were also countless restaurants and boutiques. With such a large scale, it was more than enough to accommodate the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation team. Thus, when everyone walked out of the carriage, the room keys were handed to them. A thick red carpet was laid out from the entrance of the hotel all the way to the hotel. As soon as they entered the hotel, the various chandeliers above their heads were reflected in everyone's eyes. At this time, although the sky wasn't dark yet, the light from the electric lights was already useful. When they saw the colorful lights flickering above the chandeliers, almost everyone in the observation team was shocked again. Not only that, when everyone entered the elevator in the lobby and was suddenly brought up, many people were so scared that their faces turned pale. Then, they each took their own keys and entered the floor. After entering the room, everything in front of them opened their eyes. There was a separate luxurious bathroom, a comfortable big bed, and a wide and bright floor-to-ceiling window. There was also a kettle that could boil hot water when it was turned on, as well as instant noodles, ham sausages, canned food of various flavors, and various drinks placed in every room. It was so bright that it blinded most people's eyes. Wang Shang was a girl who was very curious about anything new. When she read the instructions in the room and learned how to use the things, she immediately boiled a kettle of water. Then, she poured the instant noodles and ham sausages into it and quickly ate until she was full. Touching her full stomach, she quickly walked out of the room and went to the next room. Then, she knocked on the door of each room. Soon, under her efforts, most of the instant noodles, ham sausages, and other things in the rooms were wiped out. The kind of junk food that everyone was used to in the future had now become incomparably delicious in the eyes of many people. As a direct result, when it was time for dinner, everyone came out of their rooms and entered the banquet hall in batches. When they saw the dazzling array of delicacies, many of them cast resentful gazes at Wang Shang. Wang Shang also felt very wronged. How would she know that Xianxia had prepared so much delicious food for them at night? She thought that the so-called welcome banquet would be the same as the banquets held in the palace in the past. There would only be a small amount of food at each table, and there would be so many rules that they wouldn't even be full in the end. Fortunately, Wang Shang was very young and digested food quickly. It didn't take long for her to compete with some of her younger sisters in the same industry to eat the food in the buffet. The biggest advantage of a buffet was that you could choose food at any time according to your appetite. Then, you could put it on a plate and start eating. There was no need to pay attention to any rules, and there was no need to wait for the guests to call you and fall into an awkward situation. This was the favorite way of eating for young people. They had enough of the rules at home and could finally let go of themselves for once. Of course, they were very happy. On the other hand, when officials like Kuang Yi saw the food, their eyes widened and they felt that it was a waste. Some of the more observant people did a rough calculation. They were afraid that tonight's entertainment would cost a lot of money. Yu Qian and Shen Yu also brought a group of Xianxia officials to join the welcome banquet. Compared to most of the southern Ming officials who were at a loss or ate and drank to their heart's content, the Xianxia officials who were used to this kind of scene just held a cup of wine and casually chatted with others. In addition, all of the Xianxia officials were wearing gray Chinese tunic suits, which made them look quite stylish. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. A loud shout sounded, and a group of black cavalry rushed in from the entrance of the banquet hall. They were all dressed in neat military uniforms. After entering the banquet hall, they guarded the main roads and stood on both sides. They didn't delay everyone's meal and could guarantee that they could control the situation and deal with any unexpected situations. After waiting for these Longwei officials to stand in their positions, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's hand and strode into the banquet hall with Luan Shaochen, Leng Song, and other officers in military uniforms. Today, Yang Chendong was wearing a marshal's military uniform, which was rare, and it made him look particularly energetic. When the shiny black leather shoes landed on the red carpet, everyone's attention was instantly drawn to them. Chapter 1633. Wow! So handsome. Yang Chendong's appearance was seen by many women in the observation group, especially girls like Wang Shang. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise. There were also countless girls whose eyes were already filled with little stars. Yang Chendong was only 37 years old. This was the age when men were at their most charming. Coupled with the military uniform, he looked even more energetic. In particular, his innate temperament gave people a sense of vigor and vigor. This was something that many southern Ming officials did not have. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. This was especially true for the older ladies and their wives, who all looked at him with watery eyes. Little girls like Wang Shang, who looked like an uncle, were even more attractive. At this moment, even Kuang Yi, who wanted to argue with Yang Chendong, couldn't help but sigh. At least in terms of appearance, Yang Chendong was impeccable. Holding Hu Yan's hand, Yang Chendong entered with a smile. He looked around as if he didn't have a focal point, but he also seemed to see everyone in his eyes, giving people a feeling of being valued. At this moment, Hu Yan was also smiling like a flower. The noble temperament of a queen was undeniable. Walking together with Yang Chendong, she gave people the feeling that they were young girls. Applause quickly sounded in the banquet hall. Yu Qian, Shen Yu, Wan Shaochen, Ling Song, and Long Tainan, who was in charge of security, led the applause. Soon, the hall was enveloped in warm applause. Influenced by this, the Southern Ming observation group also applauded, causing the atmosphere to reach its peak. Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of speaking. He had just arrived in Crimson City and didn't know much about this place. As such, it was still too early for him to say anything. It was better to let everyone see and understand him first before he spoke. At that time, the meaning would be more than 100 times greater. Yang Chendong, who didn't have any intention of speaking, held a wine glass and lightly clinked glasses with Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, Xie Chong, and the others. Regardless of whether they were on the same side or not, they all had smiles on their faces as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. However, this harmonious atmosphere quickly changed due to Kuang Ye's arrival. Although Kuang Yi was over 80 years old, he quickly squeezed in front of Yang Chendong because of his tall stature and the fact that he had practiced martial arts when he was young. In response to Kuang Ye's arrival, Chen Sun and the others naturally made way for him. At the same time, they couldn't help but take a step back. They had seen Kuang Ye's performance along the way, so they naturally didn't think that Kuang Yi was here to bond. The truth was no different from what everyone had guessed. As soon as Kuang Yi squeezed in, he put on a fake smile and said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, "Wu Nan Wang is so mighty. So it's Duke Kuang, long time no see." Seeing Kuang Yi squeeze his way in, Yang Chendong, as the host, put on an appropriate smile. Kuang Yi acted as if he didn't see Yang Chendong's goodwill. Instead, he said sourly, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, to think that you've always been the best to the Han people. To think that you once told this old man that money should be spent wisely. But look at this banquet hall, the food prepared here must be expensive. With this money, wouldn't it be better to leave this food for the people? Why waste it here?" Once the word waste came out, Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, and Xie Chong's expressions immediately turned ugly. What was waste? Was it a waste to let everyone eat? Was it not a waste to let the people eat? This was clearly Kuang Yi looking for trouble. At this moment, everyone's impression of him had a trace of disgust. On the other hand, Yang Chendong's expression didn't change. He understood Kuang Yi. The information sent by the intelligence department also showed that this old man wasn't very particular about his food. He didn't have extravagant expectations of delicacies, as long as he was full. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he would say something like this. However, this was his own welcome banquet after all. As the host, Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't look too good if he said something like this at such an occasion. Yang Chendong had always been the type of person who would return the favor 10 times over. how could he be polite? He gently swirled his wine cup and then raised his head, asking word by word, waste? Huh, Sir Kuang, you're really ignorant. The change from Duke Kuang to Sir Kuang already proved Yang Chendong's attitude. At this moment, Kuang Yi clearly didn't notice this. He only heard Yang Chendong say that he was ignorant. He immediately became furious, and his voice rose 2 pitches as he asked, Bugnam of Gojosian, what do you have to say? His raised voice immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the banquet hall. Originally, because of Yang Chendong's appearance, many people intentionally or unintentionally gathered here. Now that Kuang Yi had shouted, everyone's attention and curiosity were all drawn here. Kuang Yi was angry, and his face was full of anger. However, Yang Chendong didn't care about this. Instead, he chuckled and said in a voice that wasn't loud, but could be heard clearly by the people around him. Sir Kuang, haven't you heard of the ancient saying that reason doesn't depend on one's voice? Also, this prince doesn't agree with your words of waste. A person living in this world can eat better and wear better clothes through their own efforts. What's wrong with that? Do we have to eat chaff and swallow vegetables? If that's the case, then what's the meaning of life? After being reprimanded by Yang Chendong, Kuang Ye's face became even uglier. However, he didn't lose his composure because he had already thought of the consequences of his words. Therefore, facing Yang Chendong, he didn't back down and said, there's nothing wrong with a person's pursuit. However, the ancient people also said that if one achieves success, they will help the world. You, Bugnam of Gojosian, boasted that you will lead the Han people to a better life. Have you done it? You're eating and drinking here, but have you thought about whether the people outside have food to eat? Even if it's just eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, can you do it? Of course I can do it. Almost without hesitation, Yang Chendong said this sentence. Then, he turned around and looked at the people attending the banquet and said, since this prince has said that he will give the people a better life, then he will naturally do it. This point, everyone can find the answer during the inspection of Qiqian City. If there really are people starving to death on the streets, or as Kuang Yi said, most of the people are eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, then you can curse this prince. This prince will accept it. On the other hand, if the people really live a better life under this prince's lead and don't have to worry about food and clothing, then this prince would like to ask you, Kuang Yi, what will you do? Kuang Yi was truly stunned at this moment. He originally thought that after he criticized Yang Chendong would find all kinds of reasons to explain himself. Then, he would pretend to be magnanimous and let him off. This way, he would be able to show his magnanimity and suppress Yang Chendong's arrogance. This would be very beneficial for the future interactions between Nan Ming and Yang Xia. But he never expected that Yang Hodong had no intention of backing down at all. Instead, he accepted his challenge. At this moment, he was first shocked, then he was overjoyed. What a good Yang Chendong. Sure enough, he boasted shamelessly. He actually dared to boast like this. If that was the case, then he was asking for a beating. If that was the case, then he would not be polite anymore. Okay, if everything is as Bugnam of Gojosian said, then this old man will apologize on the spot and turn around to leave. Kuang Yi said heroically. Very good, I hope that some people will keep their words. His gaze landed on Kuang Yi. Yang Chendong's expression was very calm, as if he had already won the bet. This was only a small interlude in the banquet, because Yang Chendong soon left. This was the first time everyone had met. He would not be of any use if he stayed. On the contrary, he would give everyone a sense of pressure and make everyone unhappy. With Yang Chendong's departure, the banquet hall became lively again. Wang Zuo also found an opportunity to come to Yu Qian's side. The two of them were old officials of the great Ming Dynasty and had interacted before. Because they admired each other's character, their relationship was not bad. Now that there was an opportunity, of course they had to have a good chat. Wang Zuo first observed Yu Qian and found that he did not feel unhappy because of Kuang Ye's interference. Instead, he had a smile on his face and seemed to be in a good mood. He asked curiously, Yu Qian, I'm sure you saw what happened just now. Are you not worried about your king at all? Worried? Why should I be worried? Yu Qian asked in confusion. Wang Zuo was also surprised. He thought to himself, can we still have a good chat? However, he still said, Yu Qian, are you not afraid that Grand Tutor Kuang will really wander around Crimson City? Why should I be afraid? Yu Qian asked again. Then, he chuckled and said, Wang Zuo, since the king dares to say this, there is naturally no problem. That's right, if Wang Zuo does not believe me, you can also look around the city. If you really find people who cannot afford to eat or wear clothes, tell me at any time. I am also willing to apologize like the king. After saying this, Shen Yu came to find Yu Qian and said that there were a few officials there who wanted to ask him some questions. Soon, only Wang Zuo was left. At this moment, Wang Zuo was rooted to the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. He understood Yu Qian. He was definitely a man of action and was also a bit idealistic. There was no problem with this kind of person doing things, but because he was too righteous, it was easy for him to offend people. If he wanted others to admire him, it was basically impossible. This kind of person would not boast. But what did he just say? He even told him to look around the city. If this wasn't boasting, then what was? Chapter 1634. Even when the Great Ming Dynasty was at its wealthiest, there were still beggars in the capital. That was something that the emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty could not achieve even after putting in so much effort. How many years had it been since Crimson City was built? How could there not be a single person who could not afford to eat? Also, what did Yu Qian call Yang Chendong? King. That was not king, but king. Even though it was just a single word, there was a lot more to it. This was enough to prove Yu Qian's admiration and even trust towards Yang Chendong. What kind of person was Yu Qian? He was definitely a role model for all officials. He would only treat the commoners well and would never lower his head to the nobles. Even when he was in the Great Ming Dynasty, the emperor was unable to make him lower his head. But now, he actually respected Yang Chendong so much. What was going on? Could it be that Yang Chendong's kindness towards the commoners had surpassed Yu Qian's understanding and had gained his recognition? Could it be that the truth was as Yang Chendong had said? That there were no commoners in Crimson City who could not afford to eat? No. That's impossible. A voice shouted in Wang Zuo's mind. Since ancient times, there had never been a dynasty that could provide enough food for all the commoners. At most, 60 to 70% of the commoners would have sufficient food and clothing. After all, not everyone was willing to work hard. There would always be those who were lazy. Shaking his head, Wang Zuo could not understand. However, Wang Zuo had already made up his mind. While he was in Crimson City, he had to walk around and see if Yang Chendong and Yu Qian were lying or if it was the truth. If the commoners were truly living good lives, wouldn't that mean that Yang Hodong was not only skilled in war, but also in governance? If that was the case, it would be a blessing for the commoners to hand the southern Ming dynasty over to him. On the other side, Kuang Yi also retreated, and Captain Ku Hong quickly came up to welcome him. Kuang Yi was in good spirits. It was clear that the bet from before had given him quite a bit of confidence. When he saw Ku Hong and the other two centurions, he said excitedly, "Tomorrow, all of you will split up and have a good look around the city." Humph. Let this old man expose Bugnam of Gojoseon's lies. Of course, Kuang Yi didn't think that all the people in Qiqian City could have enough food and clothing. This was simply impossible. As for why Yang Chendong dared to say this, it must be because the other party was prepared and would hide those people. Since that was the case, as long as they looked carefully, there was no need to worry about not finding any clues. At that time, he wanted to see how ugly Yang Chendong's expression would be. At that time, he would use this momentum to raise the diplomatic issue between the southern Ming dynasty and Xianxia. Presumably, there would be a breakthrough. Facing Kuang Ye's orders, Ku Hong and the other centurions naturally couldn't help but nod. Although they were shocked by Yang Xie's generosity and were envious of the Yang Xie's lifestyle, they knew that their families were still in the southern Ming dynasty. They would eventually have to go back, so they had to listen to Sir Kuang Ye's words. At this time, it wasn't just Kuang Ye. Many people were also doubting Yang Chendong's words. Those who could join the observation group were naturally wealthy, but this didn't mean that they hadn't seen poor people or beggars before. After all, it was precisely because there were poor people that they were called rich, right? Many people also decided to look around tomorrow. They didn't believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon could hide those people so well. They didn't believe that they couldn't find a single one of them. When the banquet ended, many people made such a decision in their hearts. But for most of the family members, they were attracted by the neon lights on the road outside the hotel. Looking out the window of the hotel, people were walking to and fro on the streets. Under the illumination of the straight cement road lamps, everyone was talking and laughing. There were even some young people walking on the streets hand in hand. They didn't care about the gazes of outsiders at all. And from their clothes, they were all wearing bright clothes. Everyone had a happy expression on their faces. This scene was impossible to see in the capital of Nanjing. First of all, there was a curfew in the capital. Once night fell, no one was allowed to walk on the street. How could there be any excitement? Second, even if there was no curfew, it was dark everywhere. If one wasn't careful, one would step into a ditch. Who would be willing to go out in such an environment? As for the third, there were no entertainment facilities in the capital at night. Even if one went out, what could they do? In comparison, the scenery outside the Yangxie Hotel was very different. Wang Shang stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the room and looked outside. Her heart was itching. At this moment, there was a slight knock on the door. With a trace of doubt, Wang Shang opened the door and saw her brother, Wang Zhicheng. At this time, Wang Zhicheng was already dressed. He didn't look like he was going to sleep at all. After seeing his sister, the first thing he said was, "I'm going to call a few friends to go out for a walk. Do you want to come?" Of course, Wang Zhicheng wasn't being kind. He called his sister because he was afraid that his grandfather would punish him. If his sister followed him, he would have an extra shield. Wang Shang originally had this idea. Now that her brother said it, she couldn't suppress the restlessness in her heart. She immediately nodded and said, okay, wait for me to put on my coat." Wang Shang and Wang Zhicheng quickly went out of the room. They called a few young friends, and the group of people went downstairs. Here, they saw the police in charge of security. While they were still thinking about whether going out would be prohibited, a police officer took the initiative to come up and ask them what they wanted. With a trace of nervousness and apprehension, Wang Zhicheng spoke his mind. Then, he said that if it was inconvenient, they wouldn't go out. However, to their surprise, the police only smiled and began to ask for their names. Then, some temporary identification documents were handed to them. "You can go out, but you must have identification documents. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if you encounter a patrol officer." "Okay. Now that you have these identification documents, there won't be any problems." After saying that, the police officer took the initiative to step aside and completely let them through the door behind him. After taking the identification documents, Wang Zhicheng, Wang Shang, and the others walked out of the Yang family hotel excitedly. However, what they didn't know was that behind them, a small team of 10 police officers in casual clothes was following them not far away. No matter what, they were still an observation team from the southern Ming Dynasty. If their personal safety was threatened in the southern Ming Dynasty, it would be equivalent to slapping Yang Xia and Bugnam of Gojoseon in the face. It would be equivalent to the police force not doing their job well. After leaving the Yang family hotel, Wang Zhicheng walked in the direction of the crowd. After walking for more than 2 miles, he saw a square that covered an area of dozens of acres. There were many young and middle-aged people dancing here. The dance music was played by several loudspeakers around the square. It was very rhythmic, allowing people to quickly integrate into the rhythm. Outside the square, there were small stalls everywhere. Some of them sold food, and some sold all kinds of trinkets. Basically, there were some people surrounding each stall. From afar, it gave people a very lively feeling. This place is really bustling. Wang Zhicheng stood on the spot when he saw this scene. This scene could not be seen in the capital of the southern Ming Dynasty. Perhaps it could only be seen on the 15th day of the first lunar month when there were lanterns. However, that was only because there were many people. In terms of entertainment and food, it could not be compared to here. Isn't that so? This place is really good. I don't want to leave anymore. Wang Shang said with emotion. However, when Wang Shang heard this sentence, his expression changed involuntarily. At this moment, he could not help but have some thoughts in his mind. It was only when his companion strode forward and began to beckon him to hurry up that Wang Zhicheng replied, "Coming." Then, he followed and blended into the crowd. There were delicious food, fun things, and even acrobatics. There were many things that Wang Zhicheng and the others had heard of but never seen before. After asking about the price, they found out that it was not very expensive. At least, for officials like them, they could definitely afford it. Therefore, it did not take long for them to be filled with all kinds of spoils of war. After buying a lot of things and chatting with some merchants, they found out that there was more than one square like this in Xuxian City. This was the central city district and it was also the largest square. There were many similar squares in the other 4 districts. There were even such squares in some residential areas. However, due to the large population, most of the squares were not as lively as this one. Hearing that there was more than one such place, Wang Zhicheng was truly shocked. Out of instinct, he asked the merchant about the taxes. He had estimated that every stall was extremely lively. There were many people lining up in front of it. In this way, there would be a lot of transactions in one night. The profits would not be small, so the business tax should be quite high. Ah, you're talking about the business tax. We are a small business, so it's only 10%. The stall owner was clearly someone who was willing to chat. There was no taboo on this topic. 10% business tax? How do we collect that? Wang Zhicheng was puzzled. He finally understood that 10% of the transactions in one night would be used to pay the tax. However, how would the tax collection department know how many transactions there were? Damn it, Bugnam of Gojoseon has created such good conditions for us Han people. Of course, we have to be content. Naturally, there are also people who are unaware. However, there are many workers in this square. They will secretly record the transactions of the stalls and compare them later. If anyone was caught for tax evasion, they would be locked up in prison and forced to do hard labor. With such a good life in front of them, no one dares to play with such thoughts. Chapter 1635. Self-awareness? Hearing this, Wang Zhicheng was extremely surprised. However, when he calmed down and thought about it carefully, he was relieved. If it was him, he would not play any tricks on the tax system in such a good environment. Moreover, the boss had just said that there were people who were caught for tax evasion and were treated as examples. This was enough to deter others. With such soft and hard methods, it was no wonder that everyone would cooperate fully. Naturally, all of this was based on the fairness of the tax collectors. If it was in the southern Ming dynasty, who knew what those small officials would do for their own selfish reasons? In the end, even a good policy needed to be implemented by people. If the right people could not be found, no matter how good the policy was, it would be a waste. However, the Yang Xia was extremely strict with the corruption of officials. Officials could not do business. This was already an iron law. Reputation and money could not be taken away by one person, right? Officials also had to regularly assess their performance. If their performance was poor 3 times in a row, they would be fired. This was the saying, the capable are the top, and the mediocre are the bottom. Officials were strictly prohibited from using their authority and receiving benefits. Once discovered, 3 generations of officials were not allowed to do business, and 5 generations were not allowed to be officials. Then, they could only rely on working for others to earn money. Facing such a severe punishment, there were not many people who dared to test the law. Speaking of which, under such a severe punishment, the treatment of officials was really good. Not only were their monthly salaries high, but they also enjoyed 2 holidays a year. During the holidays, there were also subsidies from the government, allowing the officials to walk around and look around. With the basic salary, it was very easy for an official to support a dozen people. There were also various protective measures for officials. For example, if an official was sick, they could be reimbursed. In other words, it was basically free. There was also a pension for officials when they retired, which could ensure that they could live well in their old age. With all kinds of protective measures, the officials did not have any worries and could do things without worry. This was completely different from the southern Ming dynasty officials, who relied on their salary as a supplement and corruption as their main source of income. As an official in the southern Ming dynasty, if there was no gray income, it was basically very difficult to survive. This directly led to the big officials being greedy and the small officials being greedy. Regarding all of this, even Emperor Yingzong could only turn a blind eye. He couldn't be ruthless. Otherwise, those officials who relied on their salary might not even be able to live as well as some of the tyrants. If that was the case, why did he do that? How could he not hear it? Qianli became an official only for wealth. That night, Wang Zhiqing heard a lot and saw a lot. His mind was almost stuffed with thoughts. His thoughts suddenly seemed to have entered another world. He suddenly realized that some things could be done this way, and they could be done even better after doing so. In the same small courtyard, Yang Lu was sitting on a chair listening to Yang Ying's report. "Master, the people we sent out have returned. They said that the members of the observation group are accompanied by the police when they go out, so there is no chance to make a move." "No chance?" Yang Lu's face showed displeasure. For others, the arrival of the observation group from the southern Ming dynasty might not be obvious. They might just think that Yang Xia was expressing his goodwill to the southern Ming dynasty. However, Yang Chendong was very clear that this was clearly Yang Chendong trying to win people's hearts and show off his muscles. Perhaps when the observation group returned to the southern Ming dynasty, waves would rise. At that time, Emperor Yingzong would suffer the consequences of his own actions. In order to prevent Yang Chendong from achieving his goal, Yang Lu was prepared to sabotage. If someone in the observation group was killed, the most important person would be killed, then the observation group would be in danger. Then, they would no longer have the mood to stay in Crimson City. Naturally, this plan would be ruined. However, he didn't expect that the police force would be dispatched. However, Yang Lu still said with some dissatisfaction, "From what I know, the Wolf Fang Special Forces is not in Crimson City. It's just a few policemen. Can they really stop the assassins we sent out?" Seeing that Yang Lu was doubting his ability, Yang Ying quickly explained, "Master, the strength of the police force is not bad. Especially in the past few years, because of sufficient funds, the police force has undergone a lot of training. Although they may not be able to display the strength of a real soldier on the battlefield, they are still quite capable in the area of local protection. Of course, no matter how powerful they are, they can't be compared to our people. However, if our people make a move, I'm afraid it will be difficult to escape from the police force. After all, there are too many of them. Just in Crimson City, the police force has reached more than 60,000 people. It's difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Once our people are caught, I'm afraid it will affect the later part of the plan. Listening to these explanations, Yang Lu could only put away his thoughts of sabotaging. However, he still muttered in dissatisfaction, there are more than 60,000 policemen in Crimson City. Are they crazy? How much money do they have to spend? At this point, Yang Lu couldn't help but let out a long sigh. When it comes to money, Yangshi is really not short of money now, especially when the navy is constantly winning. Under their strong ships and cannons, it doesn't take long for the various countries and forces that are targeted by them to be hit hard, and then they can only choose to surrender. After that, a large amount of gold and silver was sent back to Crimson City via the transport ship. With money, it would naturally be easier to do things. Of course, it wouldn't be difficult to recruit people. Moreover, he had already heard that not all of the 60,000 policemen would be stationed in Crimson City. In the end, more than half of them would be arranged to be stationed in other Yangxia territories. They were only doing their internships now. This was just a matter of spending more money. Thinking about the 60,000 policemen, there wouldn't be any problems with the safety of the 15,000 South Ming observation group. If he really wanted to make a move, the chances of him being caught were very high. In the end, he could only shake his head and say to Yang Ying, then forget it. This risk isn't worth it. That's right. Yang Ying agreed. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, Zhu Huiyun isn't to blame. If he had attacked with all his might, Yang Chendong would have died in Yunnan Manor and Mo Gui wouldn't have died. That's right, Mo Gui was Yang Ying's confidant. The uncling that Mo Gui mentioned was Yang Ying. Unfortunately, because of Zhu Huiyun's carelessness, Mo Gui died in the end. When he heard the news, Yang Ying was really sad for a while. Not to mention Yang Lu and Yang Ying's helplessness. The next morning, Wang Songshur saw that it was time for breakfast. Her grandson and granddaughter weren't up yet, so she went outside the room and woke them up. When two of the family of four were yawning during breakfast, Wang Zuo's face became ugly as he said, I told you guys to rest early. Look at you guys. Didn't you sleep last night? We slept, but it was too late. Wang Shang said casually. As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately covered her mouth with her right hand. Obviously, she knew that she had spilled the beans. Seeing that his sister had confessed so quickly, Wang Zhicheng sighed at his sister's lack of composure and took the initiative to confess everything to Wang Zuo. At the same time, he also told him what he had seen and heard that night. At first, Wang Zuo was eating while listening, as if he didn't pay much attention to it. Young people were curious about everything and liked to join in the fun. It was normal for him to have such a reaction. However, when he heard about how lively the square was and how there were over 10,000 people gathered there, his expression finally changed. He put down the chopsticks in his hand and listened attentively. From time to time, he would nod his head and cooperate with Wang Zhicheng's explanation. Finally, Wang Zhicheng gave a general idea of what had happened. He stopped and took the initiative to drink a mouthful of porridge. Then he looked at his grandfather who was silent. He knew that his grandfather was thinking about something, so he didn't disturb him and just ate by himself. He had to walk around more today. If he didn't eat his fill, he wouldn't be able to stay strong. When Wang Zhicheng was almost done with his meal, Wang Zuo, who was sitting opposite him, finally opened his mouth. Cheng, have you calculated how much money you can get from the square you saw yesterday? Wang Zhicheng hurriedly put down his chopsticks and said without hesitation, "Grandfather, grandson has calculated. Even if it wasn't 30,000 taels, it should be at least 25,000 taels. That much? Then doesn't that mean that the tax collected from Xianxia in one night is close to 3,000 taels? That's close to 100,000 taels a month? Over 1,000,000 taels a month? And this is just a square?" Obviously, this answer really shocked Wang Zhuo. "Yes," Wang Zhicheng said with a firm expression. He was also shocked when he came to this conclusion. It had to be said that this was because the quality of the food and the quality of the goods sold in the square was good. In addition, there was a lot of traffic. Moreover, the people of Qian City seemed to be very wealthy and didn't lack money. Just a square alone could collect 1,000,000 taels a year in taxes. This was equivalent to 2 months of taxes for the entire southern Ming dynasty. One had to know that the current southern Ming dynasty didn't have 3 provinces. In a year, the taxes collected were only 7 to 8 million taels. This was also because the southern Ming dynasty was very rich. If it was Baiming, it wouldn't be that much. In comparison, the difference in money was too great. These two were not opponents of the same level. If they were to fight on the same stage, what would the result be? Presumably, even an idiot would be able to tell. At this moment, Wang Zhuo was even more silent. He seemed to have already seen the scene of the southern Ming dynasty being swallowed up by Xianxia. The only thing to consider was how long the southern Ming dynasty could last. Chapter 1636. Although there were all sorts of delicious breakfasts in front of him, Wang Zhuo was unable to swallow any of them. When he saw that his family had finished eating, he stood up resolutely. He had decided to properly observe and investigate Crimson City. He wanted to find out where the drawbacks of this city were. Not only Wang Zhuo, but basically all the members of the observation group left Yangxie Hotel after breakfast and headed in different directions. They were followed by a large number of police officers. This was for their safety, so no one objected to it. More than 10,000 members of the observation group were like gusts of wind, blowing in all directions of Crimson City. Very quickly, several city districts were filled with their people. Some factories were also filled with their people, and some shops and department stores were also filled with their people. After an entire day, all the way until evening, these people began to return one after another from all over the place. If one observed carefully, they would notice that most of the officials had a serious expression on their faces. Only the accompanying family members, especially the children, would reveal ignorant smiles. Clearly, this day's visit allowed everyone to see the strength and potential of Crimson City. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the huge gap between Southern Ming and Yangxie. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the prosperity and beautiful life of Crimson City. If it wasn't for the purpose of nitpicking, even Kuang Yi had to admit that Crimson City was a very suitable city to live in. The security here was stable. If one had money here, one could sell many things. If one didn't have money here, as long as one was willing to work hard, one could also earn a lot of money and live a better life. The commoners here were not as sickly as the commoners of the Southern Ming Empire. On the contrary, they were full of vigor and walked with a spring in their step. When the commoners here walked on the streets, they walked as if they were flying. They knew that time was money and were using every minute to work hard. The commoners here had more and better prospects for the future. They were far from the lazy and dispirited Southern Ming Empire commoners who did not know where to go. The commoners here, the more they compared, the greater the gap. The hearts of the Southern Ming officials became heavier and heavier. Kuang Ye's mood was very bad today. He brought Kuhong and the other two and split into 2 directions to look for the citizens who couldn't afford to eat in Crimson City. Unfortunately, they didn't find any. There were as many factories as there were hairs on a cow in Crimson City, and there were also many jobs. As long as one had the strength to survive, one could live a good life after suffering a little. As for those who didn't work, they had long been sent to the labor camp by the police. This wasn't done because of the Southern Ming observation group, but because it had always been one of the rules. In Yang Chendong's words, some people needed to be taught a lesson. If they didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't know how precious their freedom. The facts also proved that Yang Chendong's ruthless methods were correct. Once someone was identified as a lazy person, the local resident committee would report it. Once it was reported twice in a row, the police would take action and arrest them on the grounds of laziness and send them to the labor camp. Although this was a bit unreasonable, the effect was good. Because after these people were released, they became diligent. Compared to not being able to get money and freedom after working in the labor camp, it was better to work hard after being released. At least they not only had freedom, but they could also use the money they earned. Under such a policy, it was naturally impossible for Kuang Yi to find the kind of people he mentioned. But only one day had passed. Kuang Yi wasn't discouraged. He decided to continue his search. On this night, when everyone gathered in the hotel to eat dinner, Yu Qian and Shen Yu came again. During the day, the two didn't appear and didn't accompany anyone to look at any place. They were completely free. After a day of observation and visit, they believed that the Southern Ming observation group should have a basic understanding of Crimson City, so they appeared again. When they appeared this time, the two gave the Southern Ming observation group a big gift, which was 370,000 Yang coins. Previously, in order to welcome the Southern Ming observation group, Yang Chendong took out 5 million silver and 370,000 Yang coins. The silver was used to entertain, such as food and accommodation, in the end, had to be paid to the Yang Chendong. Although these were all Yang Chendong's businesses, it was equivalent to putting his left hand into his right pocket. This was also to prevent people from reaching out their hands. The silver was used to entertain, but the Yang coins were to be given to the observation group. So when Yu Qian and Shen Yu said that as long as they were in the observation group, regardless of age or status, everyone would receive 100 Yang coins, many young people jumped up in excitement. Unlike the Southern Ming officials, these young people didn't have any intention to nitpick. They were here to broaden their horizons and have fun. Today, many people went to the Yang family's department store because the things there were the most complete and the best in the entire Crimson City. After arriving at the Yang family's department store, they really saw a lot of things that they liked. Especially the exquisite watches that could keep track of time, as well as the bicycles and electric scooters. They couldn't bear to part with them and were unwilling to put them down. Unfortunately, these things couldn't be bought with silver, they needed Yang coins. When they were really worried about what to do, Yu Qian and Shen Yu came and gave them Yang coins. How could they not be happy? Although they couldn't buy anything with 100 Yang coins, they could borrow it from others. In this way, if they gathered together, it would be a large sum of money and they could buy the things they liked. So after Yu Qian and Shen Yu announced this decision, they jumped up in joy. Then, whether it was their parents or grandparents who came with them, they all asked to borrow Yang coins. The officials who only cared about learning and watching the changes in Crimson City didn't know the importance of Yang coins. When they saw their family members asking for it, they didn't pay much attention and took out the 100 Yang coins that they had just received. After the young people received the Yang coins, they were naturally elated. They were all overjoyed. Tomorrow, they could go to the Yang family's department store and buy the things they liked. After Yu Qian and Shen Yu saw that the staff had finished distributing the coins, they continued, "Everyone, tomorrow you can go to any factory in Crimson City other than the palace, even the military barracks. If you are willing to go, you can also go to any factory in the city. However, you must apply a day in advance. If you want to go, you can tell our staff later. After the necessary registration, you can go to any place you want to go tomorrow." Is this true? The Minister of Personnel, Chen Sun, immediately stood up from his seat. He wanted to go to the city lord's manor to take a look today and see how they dealt with the ordinary affairs and the selection and promotion of officials. However, considering that this should be a secret, he didn't ask. He didn't expect Yang Chendong to take the initiative to think about it for them. Of course it's true. As I said, other than the palace, you can go to any place you want to visit and inspect. Yu Qian nodded heavily. He was also amazed by Yang Chendong's breadth of mind. Thinking about the ancient people, if they had any skills, which one of them didn't hide it, afraid that others would learn it and steal their rice bowls. How could there be someone like Yang Chendong, who would open up everything for you to see and let you learn? As for the palace not being open, it wasn't that there was anything special in the palace. It was just that Yang Chendong didn't want his place to be seen by others. That would be very awkward. Compared to the Great Ming Dynasty's palace, there wasn't much difference, so it was better not to see it. Chen Sun was very satisfied with this answer. He immediately called the staff over and added the word City Lord's Manor. On the other side, Kuang Yi also quickly found the staff and added the words barracks. The other officials also applied according to their own preferences and interests. After knowing that the application form would be quickly approved and sent to their rooms, and that they could enter as they wished the next morning, all of the Southern Ming officials had a satisfied look on their faces. They didn't know that the reason why Yang Chendong dared to show them those things was that he had already regarded them as Yang Xie's future officials and people. Since everyone would be a family in the future, what was the big deal about seeing what a family looked like in advance? That night, whether it was the officials or their family members, they were all very satisfied. Even the people who went to the night market at night decreased a lot. Obviously, they all wanted to have a good night's sleep so that they would have the energy to go to the goal they had set. After Yu Qian and Shen Yu completed the task, they sent someone to report the results to Yang Chendong. There was only one answer they got. Although they showed them, Yang coins were absolutely not allowed to be exchanged. Even if the officials came to the door in the name of catching up, they were not allowed to exchange in private. Whoever dared to violate the rules would be severely punished. The reason why they weren't allowed to exchange silver for Yang coins was because of Yang Chendong's small scheme. He was still counting on Yang coins to attract these officials. If they really exchanged Yang coins, then everything would be meaningless. Yang Chendong had already heard about the private exchange of Yang coins from Yang Wu. Some Yang Xia officials, because of their large families and businesses, needed more money to support them. They couldn't be corrupt, but they were very lustful. They married a lot of wives and had a lot of children. Their lives were a bit tight. Taking out the Yang coins from their monthly salary to exchange for silver was undoubtedly the best way to make money. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.